20. The sun cut slowly across the flagstones. David was still asleep. His watch showed 9 o'clock. The nightmare had gone. His breathing was deep and regular. The church was quite warm now. The sun moved fast, stripping his feet, then his chest, through the gaps in the pews. Then, like an oxyacetylene torch, he singed the veins in his eyelids. He woke suddenly, as if he were on fire. He lugged his sunglasses out of his top pocket and clamped them on his nose. The mauve iris expanded like hot chestnuts. The dark glass slowly cooled his eyes. Better. Much better. The pain of supreme light was indescribable. Turning away from the sun, he levered himself to his knees. He was hungry and unshaven. It was becoming routine. Taking out his paper knife, he sharpened the wooden blade with a penknife. It was so sharp. He sucked the edge between his lips and cut the top lip. He had to press either side of the slit before a droplet of blood reddened. He tasted the blood. It was good. Not as good as breakfast, though. Now he was prepared for the day. He knew he'd need the paper knife today, but he didn't know what for. He slipped it into his jacket pocket. Without getting up, he peered over the pew. The sun dazzled its yellow splinters on the cross. As he gazed at it, he removed the hard-grained sleep from the corners of his eyes, but he didn't take his glasses off. How I'd love to have some buttered toast, eggs and bacon, sausages, tomatoes, mushrooms, fried bread, marmalade, grapefruit, coffee and cream, and a bloody good teeth clean. He heard the church door open behind him. He ducked between the pews until he was lying on the prayer mats again. Listening intently, he could make out the patter of children's feet and their clear laughter. In their best Sunday clothes, the children danced down the centre aisle. Gilly led them. They played hopscotch on the flagstones as they approached the altar. Peeping between the slots in the wood, David could see the girls in their white socks and the boys in their grey. Pressing his forehead on the footstool and straining his neck, he discovered that all the children were armed with flowers. Dahlias, like excited torches, frothy carnations, roses, and 2 giant sunflowers. They'd come to decorate the church. They looked very different to the monsters they had been 6 hours ago. Now they were little cherubims, and they knew it. The longer David stayed in this village, the more he couldn't understand. How could they mix religions like they did? They'd achieved a strange harmony of sadism and laughter, lechery and beauty. He almost envied them. He'd never known anything like it. The nearest thing to it was the Tahitians, who practiced voodoo and were also Catholics. In the village, in their own secret way, they had found balance. It disturbed him. They had shown him he was a failure. He had come to destroy them, and they were destroying him. He shut his eyes and listened to their whispers and giggles. Even the whispering was laughter, and the laughter was secret. He was the outsider and knew it. He heard his name mentioned twice. This was followed by giggles. He wanted to peek, but he didn't. The giggling continued. Why didn't he get up and smack their smutty little faces? They should all be taken away to remand homes, yet he knew no one would understand them there, and they needed understanding. They would call the children evil, but were they? Or were they good? Was the basis of his life completely wrong? Were they in fact right? Or had they twisted his mind? Had they? The giggles continued, and then for no reason, they stopped. There was silence. Only the church fractionally shifted on her stones. But that was beyond hearing. That was part of history continuing. David didn't move. The silence was filled with dust skating in sunlight. David shifted the position of his head until he was lying on his back and staring at the roof. Suddenly, heads converged in on him, children's laughing heads, for they were laughing again at him. He didn't attempt to get up, but counted their heads. There were the twins, James and John, and Susan with little Bertie. Joan and Gilly was not there. Once again, he knew he'd been duped by laughter. He tried to get up, but the children were ready for him. Their tiny claws probed towards him. He attempted to fight them off, but they weren't really attacking him. Not exactly. Joan's and Susan's slippery fingers were searching under his arms. One of the twins had got his desert boots off. The left one. He laughed at first, and then he really laughed. They were tickling him. They were laughing too, but his laughter hurt. It tore through him as their ruthless fingers danced over his instep and under his armpits. God, he laughed. How he laughed. His arms flailed wildly like a blind man as he laughed. With a swift kick of his right boot, he managed to knock James back. The boy banged his elbow against the opposite pew, but returned to the battle of the tickle. David wrenched himself up onto his elbows, butting Joan in the chest. Then, swearing profanely, he jumped to his feet. The children cowered away. They were quick to realize when the foot was in the other shoe. David slipped his left boot on again.
Now, you little bastards, for that's what you are. What's going on? Look, I try and understand you, and what do? You play the monkey with me. Well, if I don't get some straight answers from you now, I'm going to have you sent away from home. To a remand school. And that won't be very nice, see, right? Why did you do what you did last night? It was the filthiest archery I've ever seen. You behaved like goats. Why?
Susan assumed the role of leader.
Wouldn't you like to play hide and seek, mister? Church is a super place for it. Behind the altar's great.
David seized her by the wrist. He was about to question her when she took the initiative and grabbed his sunglasses. Provocatively, she dangled them in front of him. He moved into a flush of sunlight to take them off her. He couldn't see. He was blind. He didn't know where he was. Then he blacked out. He grabbed Susan by the throat and forced her back against the huge bronze eagle which held the Bible between its wings. He groped for his glasses. She was very frightened and handed them back. The eagle's talons clawed at her buttocks. As he hurriedly put the glasses on, she wriggled free. She was so shaken she began to sob violently. David staggered against a pew as his mind thrust him back into the present. Still dazed, hardly knowing where he was, he sat down on the flagstones. It took him some time to refocus. He felt as if his eyes were filled with petrol. The sun's blast had set his nerves on edge. His tear ducts burned. He wept pure acid. It took him about a minute before he was conscious that Susan was crying. She was clinging to Joan and weeping her heart out. He got up slowly and moved to her. "What's the matter, Susan?"
You hurt me, Mr. Hanlin. You hurt me, you did.
Sorry, Susan. I'm very sorry. The sun blinded me, you see, so I had to grab onto something. God, I've got a headache. I must have blacked out for a second.
My fault a bit, I suppose, sir. I shouldn't have pinched your sunglasses.
No, you shouldn't. That's why we're both crying. Have a licorice, all sort.
He pulled out a slept-on packet from his trouser pocket. He invited her to take one. Miraculously, her tears disappeared as she wedged her fingers into the box.
But don't take those with the weeny aniseed balls on. I'm very partial to them myself.
She selected 3 and gobbled them straight down.
Now, kids.
His thoughts dried up. Beyond Susan's head he could see the altar. The cross was missing. and the only person who could have taken it was Gilly. That was why they were treating him to their conjuring tricks. He raced down to the altar, a now common bunch of garlic flowers lay dappled in the sunlight. He picked up the flowers and turned to the children, who were beating a hasty retreat down the aisle.
Gilly did this, kids, didn't she? They're using the cross for satanic rites, aren't they? Where is she then? Where is she?
The children ignored him and lugged open the huge door. David ran after them. Susan seemed to be waiting for him, but as he got nearer, she ran away again. His strides were twice as long as hers, so soon caught hold of her by her ponytail and yanked her to the standstill. She began to cry again. He gave her another licorice allsort. Then he tantalized her with the whole box. "If you take me to where Gilly's gone with that cross, I'll give you the whole packet, I promise you. And you'll be saving a lot of lives. The killer will want that cross in order to perform his next murder." Susan smiled.
Look, Susan, this murderer has killed 2 of your friends, both the same age as you, and it won't put him out to kill a 3rd.
She continued to smile.
And if my prediction's correct, he'll strike again this lunchtime. I know it sounds like an adventure story, but let me assure you, it's not. His 2nd killing was on Midsummer Eve, and his 3rd'll be today, Midsummer's Day. He or she is obviously insane, but I'll make sure he's put away. He won't haunt your lives anymore. But I need your help, Susan.
For the first time in 2 days, David felt excited. He was sure that this was a real lead. Beyond any doubt, he knew that he'd be in at the climax. He'd throw the spanner in the works. So just for today, he withdrew his resignation.
Well, Susan?
She grabbed the sweets.
"All right, mister, this way."
She pointed to the woods. As they walked to the church gate, the Reverend White passed them. David was undecided whether to stop and call him a liar or just follow Susan. But the cross was the lead, so he went with Susan. The Reverend called out to him.
"I noticed the can was moved when I returned to finish watering the dead last night. I do so hope you enjoyed yourself playing with the watering can."
David would have taken up the bait, but for Susan's insistent tug on his arm. Soon they'd left the main street and were in the summer woods. Under the trees, it was the brightest green he'd ever seen. Nothing could be more beautiful. And yet... He questioned her about her dubious midnight exploits, and she asked him questions about butterflies. She told him of the butterfly funeral Anna had conducted in the cat butcher's hedge. Suddenly, he stopped and listened. There were gentle footsteps to his left, delicate footfalls twittering the leaves, and to his right, blow lamps probing his spine. The climax was very near. They were in the middle of the wood. In front of them, a glade swam in green sunshine, and the cross culprit sat in the centre of the glade. Gilly was sitting cross-legged in the green light. She was polishing the cross with a rag and a tin of Brillo. When she saw them, she smiled happily. David knew he should laugh, but he only felt anger tighten in his stomach. He wanted to smack her face because she'd tricked him. Instead, he slumped against a young elm, and out of the undergrowth, the whispering footsteps materialized into the gang. They were laughing and peering down at him, the church all over again. Then, without warning, Gilly sprang to her feet, clasping the cross, rag and Brillo, and ran towards the village. The children followed her. David gave chase.
Where the hell are you taking that cross?
I knew I was right. They'll take me to the killer. I knew they would. As he chased after their light feet, Susan called over her left shoulder without slowing down.
"Taking the cross back to the church, Inspector. We always do, after we've cleaned it." Reverend White, she puffed. Reverend White always lets us clean it to show us he trusts us.
Then she accelerated, and the disgruntled David gave up. As he pulled himself to a halt, he tripped over a dead branch. He fell face forward but managed to thrust an arm in front of him. His wrist took the force of the fall. With ankle flick, he rolled over onto his side. His glasses were askew, but at least they weren't broken. Painfully, he dragged himself until he was leaning against the branch. The rotting bark was pleasantly damp against his shoulder blades, and even though the soil had been bombarded by sun, it still insinuated moisture along his thighs. He was exhausted and frustrated, as usual. The familiar sensations of failure seeped into his brain. He knew he had come to the center. All he could do now was wait for the killer to show his hand. And he knew he would show his hand before the dogs and machines arrived. David checked his watch. They should be here in about 10 minutes' time. He was sure they'd arrive on the dot at 10. He relaxed against the branch. The blow lamp searched the back of his neck, and then it flashed into his mind. Was Jippo the murderer? He had the motive. He had the opportunity. Motive, hate of mankind. Opportunity, he practically owned the wood. Was Jippo challenging him? Was it as obvious as this? Every time he walked through these woods, Jippo had followed him. Perhaps this was it. The obvious. And it was being dangled in front of his nose, and Jippo intended to complete the anarchy by murdering David. Not a pleasant thought. So the murderer was showing his hand. Strange about the hat pin, though. But not so strange. He found a bat pinned to a tree with a hat pin yesterday morning. So the Western Showdown's here. Jippo, come out. His words bruised the silence. The silence healed easily. I know you're there. Your hate burns through the trees. Let's have the showdown. You're pushing me into it. You've been very clever. You've been so obvious I've missed it. Anybody could have caught you without even thinking. My mistake was that I thought. I nearly missed you. A pigeon provided a doubtful chorus. The blow lamps continued. David lost his temper. He stood up. I've a warrant in my pocket to arrest you. I suggest you come quietly. I'm lying again. Still, it's in a good cause. The continuation of my sanity. No need to be too frightened, Jippo. We only want to further our inquiries. Your guilt will have to be proved, so come out like a good boy. Still no Jippo. The pigeon was working overtime. I know how you did it too, Jippo. Nasty weapon, using the heel of your hand to break Diane's neck, and then the hat pin. That was brilliant. I never associated you with women's weapons. You took me in there. But now things are reversed because I'm taking you in. Jippo appeared, his bow nicely drawn by his ear. He wasn't smiling. It wasn't me, Inspector. You know it wasn't me. You know who it was. But you can't prove it, can you? And you don't want to, do you? You're very dangerous, Inspector. You think. David noticed that Jippo's accent had gone. There was a vague Cornwall burr, but it was very subtle. Who did it then, Jippo? Who? You'll never live to tell it. Only two people know. You and I saw Billy murdered. Not even the murderer knows as well as you and I. Yes, I'm glad you like my speech better this way. So do I. Both ways are natural to me. The other's handier. Well, this is the end of the line for you. This will be the last murder. The murder of you. David knew he'd found the circle. The murderer grinned. David grinned back. Death had arrived. He was frightened but slightly relieved. No more shaving or lust. Admittedly, he would have liked to have shafted Hot Anna and leave a proper epitaph, rather than just a paragraph of failure. The arrow seemed to lengthen as Jippo drew it hard into the triangle. It felt cool against his cheekbone. The feathers whispered against his ear. Now he would kill, and that would be that. Silence. David listened to the grass growing, the sun growing into a bonfire, and imperceptibly he felt his toenails growing too, and his corns, and the aura of himself pushing outwards, and he was waiting as usual. Jippo's eyes became Eurasian slits. It was now and never again. A rabbit skidded into the clearing, sniffed the humans, and burrowed into the fern. Now. An Alsatian's harsh cough clattered into the leaves, and then another, and then every Alsatian in the world. The cavalry was coming. Jippo's head swung to the left as the second dog coughed. David decided to live. He tackled low as Jippo screamed the arrow at him. The arrow arrived safely in David's shoulder. Another wound. His dead brother's marksmanship flooded back into his memory. Jippo staggered back under the tackle. Then they fought. No longer disciplined and according to any rules. No, just to the death now. Claws, fangs and feet, searching out the intricate groin, eyes and nostrils. David's glasses performed a parabola as Jippo gouged at his nose. The glasses fell 4 feet away in a pool of shadow. Jippo's bow kept the glasses company. Jippo tried to lever an arrow out of his quiver. David snapped the quiver off the gypsy's shoulders. They rolled over onto the sun's furnace. The dogs were hunting nearer. The sun shriveled David's eyes. Much worse than in the church, he fastened a throttle hold on Jippo's jugular vein. The bull-goring pain in his shoulder made him sweat and shake. Then Jippo slammed a sharp elbow against the tunneling arrow. The arrow was ripped out of David's shoulder. The blood roared and left his lair. Suddenly, they were both swamped in David's blood. The sun was sending him mad. He couldn't think properly as it roasted his eyeballs. They both were fighting for strangleholds, grappling at the other's throat. David knew he'd black out soon. The reek of his own blood churned his bowels. Blood was everywhere, and the dogs were coming.